A new report from the Energy Information Administration shows that solar electricity will dominate the marketplace as far as generation investment over the coming years. Toshiba tests a fully transparent solar cell, and America's first totally solar city takes a direct hit from the Hurricane Ian and keeps the energy flowing. I'm Jay Warmke with Blue Rock Station, and this is the news from the solar industry for the week of October 3rd. So this recent report from EIA, the Energy Information Administration, was just released for the first half of 2022, and it shows that the renewable energy generation capacity has increased about 30% over last year. Now, in fact, some of the changes that were highlighted in this report show that coal actually dropped about 15% over the past year as far as its capacity, with a lot of those coal power plants being shut down. It still represents about 20% of the generating capacity within the United States, however. Natural gas, which of course is the lion's share of the electrical generation capacity fuel source, it increased almost 12% during the last year, coming up to about 44%. Nuclear energy stayed the same, didn't really change, but still does represent about 16% of the generating capacity. Hydroelectric actually increased about 16.5% during this past 12 months, now representing about 6.1% of the electrical grid fuel source. And renewable energy, as I mentioned earlier, increased 29.6%, or almost 30%, representing now wind and solar a full 12% of the generating capacity on the grid. Now, outside of these numbers, these are just utility scale projects, but we also saw an increase in small solar, which is basically owner-owned capacity, and these would be for residential or commercial systems. That increased about 21%. Now, it still represents a fairly insignificant amount of the electricity that's used in the nation, about 1.5%, but that's growing pretty rapidly. All right, now according to FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they also released a report this week, and it's still basically a battle between natural gas, wind, and solar. As you can see from these numbers, the generating capacity that was added to the grid, this is the new capacity, is about a third natural gas, about a third wind, and about a third solar. However, what they were doing in this report, or what they've reported, is that this is all about to change. In fact, over the next 3 years, they're really seeing that solar is going to dominate the new investment in generating capacity on the grid. This may be in part due to the Inflation Reduction Act, but I think this was already a trend that was happening before that act passed. They're looking at coal actually seeing another further 10% reduction in capacity over the next 3 years. Natural gas will gain. It'll gain at about 7.6%, a modest gain there. Nuclear, just fractional gains. I think there's one generator that's going to be replaced or expanded. Hydro, looking at a little bit of increase. Of course, most of the hydro that's available has been built out, and there has been some issues with water shortages out west, where hydro is a larger capacity of the production out there, so it's actually seen a decline because of that. Wind will see growth at about 25% over the next 3 years, but solar's the big dog now. 70%, fully 70% of the new generation that's coming online in the next 3 years will be solar, according to FERC anyway. Now, it's also interesting to note in these reports, they were talking about some of the rising electric costs, and we're seeing that the residential cost of electricity has actually increased about 11.5% over last year, up to, on average, almost 15.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Commercial increased 14.2%, and industrial, that was the huge increase, that's increased about 25%. So overall, we've seen electric prices increase by about 15%. So why is this happening? Well, they're looking at, they're really blaming large increases in the cost of natural gas and coal, which of course still makes up about 65% of the electric generating fuel source. Now, Toshiba has tested a fully transparent solar cell. They've basically created a cuprous oxide cell, and they're finding that that's operating just independently at about 9.5% efficiency, which isn't very high, but it is an increase of about 1% over last year, so it's gaining in efficiency very quickly. What they're looking at, however, and as this little chart here shows, is that they're looking at combining it with silicon cells, and when they do that, when they layer these, they can actually get a solar cell that's about 28.5% efficient. Babcock Ranch, which touts itself as the America's first solar-powered community, took a direct hit by Hurricane Ian that just happened. Now, it's located about 12 miles north of Fort Myers, Florida. Has about 700,000 panels serving 2,000 homes. And it did not lose power during the hurricane. So it really is a testament to the resiliency of solar. Well, an additional 1.8 million other Florida residents did lose power during the hurricane. Well, that's news from the solar industry for this week. We'll see you next week.